I think in my long experience of being an evangelical Christian for 42 years, the experience of the outworking of how you value yourself as a single person, say living on your own, is totally different to the Jewish aspect. In Judaism, it's very important health. That's why on Jewish New Year's you get, unlike Christian Christmas cards, in Jewish New Year's it's always wishing you a happy new year, well over the fast, and please God keeping well and everything. It's health is always mentioned, often on Jewish New Year's, wishing you health for the following year. Health, I remember as a child being puzzled by this. Why did they go on about health? Right, but I think I'm now 61, I do understand. But when you're a child, you're thinking, why do they wish people, a long life and a healthy life, I couldn't understand it as a child. But of course, I now understand it, because as you get older, you're getting more likely to have health problems. So you do wish each other, you're keeping well. It's the first question Jewish people ask, are you keeping well? Oh dear, what's the matter? Are you looking after yourself? Are you eating well? Are you must look after yourself. The most important thing, one of the most important things, the outworking of Judaism, is self-care. It's very important you look after your health. It's so important. So if you're a single person living on your own, looking after yourself is very, very important. You must look after yourself. Are you eating enough? If you're not, well, you should have been to the doctor. You need to go to the doctor. You've got to look after yourself. Are you eating enough? Are you keeping yourself warm? Have you got a winter coat? Everything in Judaism, whether it's Reform or Orthodox, whatever, is all about, are you looking after yourself? You must look after yourself. Right? Now, within Christianity, my experience is the complete and utter opposite. Because Christianity views, in my experience of evangelical Christianity, which is going to affect, which is messianic, it's the whole thing is that you mustn't be concerned about self. To be concerned about self is to be selfish. So from the evangelical Christian point of view, which affects all the denominations of Protestant Christianity, is that you must forget about self and be concerned only with other people. So as a single person, unmarried, living on your own, or whether if you're sharing flats, the idea is that you mustn't be concerned about looking after yourself in terms of feeding yourself correctly, clothing yourself correctly, heating yourself correctly, making sure you get enough sleep and everything. What is most important is you must be concerned about other people. In other words, other people come before you, because within the outworking of Christianity, in my long experience of 42 years, is that self is not important. What matters is other people. You must put other people before self, because to be concerned about yourself is automatically construed as being selfish. Now, what I found in practice is this is actually very, very damaging, because I don't think, strangely, I looked after myself enough. Because I always liked cooking, and I used to cook for neighbours and things. I was always cooking for other people as well, giving food to the elderly as well, because I like cooking was my hobby. But what I found with Christianity is that their attitude towards that was that unless I was giving food to other people, then to actually bother to cook myself a meal was considered self-indulgent and rather vain and self-preoccupied, and the assumption was that I was rather a selfish person. The view, particularly like with women, interestingly, so often was, why are you cooking yourself a meal when you should be doing other things like caring for other people? And this was the feedback I would get from Christians all during my life, was that, why are you bothering to look after yourself by cooking yourself a meal from scratch? Or why are you even looking after yourself by staying in when you're not well, when there's other people worse off than you who need your help. Now this is where the contrast between Christianity and the culture of Christianity and the culture of Judaism is so it's miles apart. As a single woman within the Jewish community, the most important thing is, are you looking after yourself? Are you eating enough? You look a bit pale. Are you not well? Have you been to the doctor? Don't be dieting too much. It's important to eat. You know, are you heating yourself? How are you managing in the winter? It's very cold here. Have you? So within Judaism, it's all about, are you looking after yourself? Are you eating enough? Are you, you need to go to the doctor. You don't look well. Don't put it off. And they'll check up afterwards. Have you been to the doctor? You still don't look well. So everything within Judaism, even down to the New Year card, is about, you must look after your health. And it's within Judaism, it's like, it's important to look after your health. It's about being responsible and taking care of your health. Even as a single person, it is legitimate and part of the culture of Judaism that you look after yourself. It's imperative you look after yourself. Self-care. Men, you need to, you're looking like a schluck. You need a haircut. Look after yourself. Go and get your hair done. Look, your clothes are a bit dirty. You must look after yourself. And it's very important within Judaism to be looking after your basic self-care, of getting your hair cut, like men, the old bachelors are living on their own. You hear this a lot with men, unmarried men. Very typically, they're suffering from depression, they're living on their own, they're neglecting themselves, they're perhaps not washing their hair regularly, they don't bother doing they don't bother looking after themselves. And so that you need, which you often do in Judaism, you get somebody coming alongside and say, you're looking a bit of a schlop, you get your hair done. I don't feel like getting my hair. Get your hair done, you feel better. Are you eating enough? You need to be eating properly. Because you don't get this within Christianity. Because within Christianity, for a single person, a person on their own, self doesn't matter. And you get the situation, I've seen it with older spinsters when I was young, and you look at these 45, 50, 55, 60-year-old women, very poor health. They get sick. Nobody really cares about them. It's like they're still expected to do things for the church. So you get a culture where you've got single people who are in very poor health, who probably need looking after and some care, and somebody to take an interest in them. And what happens is, these are the people that are doing all the church activity and running round, trying to look after other people who are fit and well and healthy and don't really need their help. And what I saw in practice is, you've got so many single people, particularly older people, living on their own, who are neglecting themselves and putting other people before their own health and well-being. So they're not necessarily hitting the homes adequately. They're not staying in bed when they should be staying in bed. They're not eating enough. They're not eating the right foods. And this is all because of the culture of Christianity that self does not matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is other people. And all that matters, in my long experience, Christians are interested in is, what are you doing for other people? Not how you are. I've had Christians visit me, I've had missionaries visit me when I've been very poorly, and all they're concerned about, as a single person living on my own who's ill, is not how I am and is there anything I can do to help you. It's, what are you doing for the church? What are you doing for the church? And this is the awful thing about Christianity, is I began to see that, strangely enough, even though I always felt that I was an independent person who did look after my needs, I think I became aware during, as I went on into live Christianity and being in the church, that I don't actually think I was actually looking after myself as well as I should have done. Because it's frowned on. It's frowned on. I do remember going into hospital for an operation, and it was a condition of this day operation that there was somebody who could call in to see how I was. They would only do this day operation on condition there was somebody who would be popping in to see how I was. Now, I didn't have anybody, so I approached some church organisation attached to a Baptist church that I eventually ended up attending. And I said, is there anybody who could pop in for the next few days after the operation to see how I am? Because this is the condition of the operation and they need to check that I'm all right, that nothing has happened. And so I sensibly, in my view, arranged for somebody to, they had my phone number, they had the address, to pop in after the operation to see how I was. Now, a lady did call in, and I was in a very, very bad way, as you can imagine. It was a mouth operation, and so when my mouth was, I was all swollen, I was in terrible pain, because you are in pain. The painkillers aren't enough to deal with the pain, and they can't give you any more because they're only allowed to give you a certain dose. And I was very, very weak. I had severe ME, chronic, very, very severe ME, very ill. I was all, it was in a bad way. And as soon as she came in, I'd been on my own, as you can imagine, in a lot of pain. And I started to talk to her naturally, saying, oh, I think I bit my tongue during the operation. My tongue swelled. I started talking to her about how I was. And immediately that look came across her face that I've seen so often in evangelical Christians, so many Christians over the years, the decades, is, aren't you selfish? Talking about yourself and how ill you feel. And this was typical Christianity, is that she was judging me, and I could feel it, that I was talking about how ill I was and how in pain I was. Right? And this is what's frowned on in Christianity. They don't like it. You don't tell a Christian how you're in severe pain. You never tell them. What you must do with a Christian, no matter how much pain you're in, or how terrible things are, what you must do is be concerned about them. The Christian wants you to be wrapped up in them. So it doesn't matter how much pain you're in. You must never mention your pain. No, 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 that is frowned on. That's not Christ-like. Christ wouldn't do that, would he? He wouldn't tell you, oh, I'm in terrible pain here on the cross. No, no, Christ would be concerned about you, even though he's dying a horrible death on the cross. The Christian view is, well, Jesus is dying a horrible death on the cross, but he's not going to be interested in you. He's interested in his mother, right? He's not going to tell his mother, I'm in so much pain, Mum. I'm in so much pain, Mum. No, no, no. Jesus wouldn't have done that. He is immediately only concerned about his mother's well-being, right? That is the idea that Christians think. So you can't say to a fellow Christian, I feel so ill, I feel so depressed, I'm in so much pain, because Christians view that as being selfish and self-indulgent and only concerned about self. This was my experience for 42 years. So I could never tell a Christian how things really were, because the very nature of talking about self is considered self-indulgent and sinful and wrong. Right. What the Christian is meant to be doing is to be overly concerned about other people. So there you are, you're very, very sick, you're alone in a great deal of pain. Somebody comes to see you haven't seen, you've been all on your own, all day and all night, you're living on your own, you're in the most terrible pain, you've had an operation, and it's frowned on when you start talking about self, like, oh, so much pain, I'm a bit fatigued, and this. You know, you're not allowed to. It's frowned on. What you must do is immediately focus on them. Oh, you're so wonderful coming to see me. How are you? How are you? How's so-and-so in the church? How's this? How's that? Everything has to be about them. So you're in dire agony. You can't tell them when you're in dire agony. You have to be all the time fussing and flapping over them. So the next day she came, and I'm still in dire agony, and I'm still feeling sick, and I realised I can't tell her how I am. So as soon as she arrives, I tell her how wonderful she is to come and help me, and then she's smiling then, she's loving it. She immediately smiled and her face lit up. She wasn't asking how I was. And I was saying, oh, you're so wonderful coming to see me. I do appreciate it. You're fantastic. I think you're great. I was schmoozing and telling her how great she was. And she was loving it. And then as soon as I told her, she said, then she eventually said, well, how are you? And I said, oh, I'm in a lot of pain. And then the face hardened. She wasn't interested. So then I schmoozed again and told her how fantastic she was. But I then asked her for more help because I said for something, and I could see her face harden again. And in the end, what I decided to do was I'd bought her a present in advance anyway, and I gave her this box of chocolates, and I said, here you are. Thank you so much for you. I don't know what I've done without you. And I said, there's no need to come again. I actually did need her to come again, but I didn't. And the reason being was the way she kept looking at me the whole time during the visit, each visit, was the typical look that I've had from so many Christians over the decades. Is, what a selfish young woman you are. Here you are, complaining that you're in pain, complaining you're not well, needing me to go out and get stuff for you because you're too apparently ill to do it. And I felt judged. I felt very much judged by her, and that's how I felt from Christians all the time, was judged. And now within Christianity, as you know, judging is like very much all Christians are instructed all the time, we mustn't judge one another, 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 we must love one another, we mustn't judge one another. But in practice, people do judge each other, because what people are doing when they're judging is they're making an assessment of you, right, according to what you're saying. Now, the problem with it within Christianity is that the idea of looking after self and taking care of self is considered to be selfish. This is the problem within Christianity, is it frowns on self-care. It doesn't encourage people to actually look after their own basic needs, and that it's actually important that you do so, and that God expects you to, wants you to look after yourself, to make sure you get enough sleep, to make sure that you have enough to eat and drink, to make sure that you are adequately get enough heating, to actually do everything possible to help yourself, to self-care. And this is what Christianity just doesn't do. It doesn't do it. It frowns on it because it considers all self-care to mean that you are selfish and preoccupied with self and have no interest in other people. And that the idea is that no matter how ill you are, however much in pain you are, whatever bad state you are, other people's needs come before you. So what in effect you have within the church is particularly a lot of older women who are very sick, they have a number of serious health conditions, they're very ill, running around, fussing and fretting over other people who don't need the help, but they feel emotionally compelled that they must be looking after other people, because this is what the church and the culture of Christianity expects. And this is what I think is one of the most damaging aspects of Christianity, is that, and I think it permeates out into the culture, the Christian culture generally, is that looking after yourself is considered very un-Christ-like. In other words, Jesus wouldn't be concerned about making sure that he had enough to eat, he had enough to drink, that he shaved, that he had clothes, that he found somewhere to sleep. The idea is that Jesus actually neglected himself. In other words, Jesus wouldn't bother to be interested or concerned about his own needs at all. He wouldn't be bothered making sure he had 3 meals a day. He wouldn't be bothered to making sure he had a blanket at night to sleep. He wouldn't make sure that he had found a bed to sleep in. He wouldn't make sure he was warm enough. He wouldn't make sure his clothes were clean and washed. No, Jesus simply neglected all his own needs, because what mattered to Jesus was you. You are more important than his own needs. And so he would neglect all his own needs and be totally preoccupied with you. So even if he's dying on the cross and in dire agony, he's totally preoccupied with the robbers on the cross. How are the robbers? How are you? How are you? How are you? He's not going to tell anybody that he's in dire agony, that he's just, nothing. It's like, it's so weird. But this is Christianity. And I always felt judged, and it shows itself not necessarily always in words, but in the way people look at you. When you say something like, oh, I did some cooking the other day, or I've got to, I'm going to do some decorating, or I'm going to look after the garden, I'm going to look after my garden. If I tell a Christian that I've done some gardening, the Christian views that as very selfish, because the way the Christian thinks is, why are you tending to your garden when you could be doing something for the church? What Christians would often say to me was, if I did some gardening, say tidied my garden, they would respond by saying, well, if you're tidying your garden, why don't you tidy the garden at church? Why don't you volunteer and do Christians' gardens? In other words, if I did anything for myself, like cook myself a meal, tidy my flat, tidy the garden, which is my responsibility as a tenant, the Christian would always respond and say to me, oh, you like gardening? Well, you can do something for the church. You like gardening? Oh, you could volunteer and do people's gardens. Oh, you like cooking? You could do something for the church. And what I found was people were always trying to organise me with anything I told them that I did to do something for the church. So in the end, I realised after many years, don't tell a Christian that you've cleaned your home. Don't tell a Christian you've just mowed the lawn. Don't tell a Christian you've tidied your garden, which is your responsibility. Don't tell the Christian that you cook yourself a nice meal, because the Christian will then try and organise you to say, well, you could do something for the church. Well, I'm not going to do anything for the church. This is terrible when you become ill, like I was. My health has never been very good. I was at theological college, and one of the things I had at theological college was a work day. Right, I won't say which denomination it was, because I don't want to slag off a particular denomination, but it's Protestant. Because this is where it's very strong in my experience within anything Protestant. I don't know if it's as bad within the Catholic culture, but within the Protestant culture, it's terrible, the work ethic. Now, I was never very strong. I've never been very strong. Now, I told them I'm not very strong, so they had me trying to weed the garden. Now, I was so physically weak, I couldn't even dig the weeds out. And I told them, I said, I can't do it. I've tried and I can't dig the weeds out. So they were determined to find something for me to do, but everything they tried to give me to do, I couldn't do because I was so physically weak. And I was so ashamed and embarrassed. I now realise I hadn't done anything wrong. I was physically very, very, very weak. And this was before the diagnosis of severe ME chronic fatigue syndrome. So my health was actually going downhill. I was actually struggling in taking care of myself, but I didn't know what was the matter with me. I thought, why am I so tired? Why is everything so hard? But, I kept going to the doctor and they didn't know what was the matter with me. And on this work day, it was embarrassing. I was so ashamed. Well, you've got to find something to do. You've got to do something. And everything they tried to find for me to do, I couldn't do. Now, this was a 2-day work project. So on the second day, I was so ashamed and embarrassed. I felt they didn't seem to pick up there was a problem. That was the interesting thing, is these are smart, intelligent people. These are lecturers. people and senior students were organising this workday, and everything they gave me to do, I couldn't physically do. And surely common sense up here would say, look, you're obviously not very strong, so don't worry about it. The Jewish approach would be, you're obviously not very strong. Are you not well? And I could have said, well, I seem to be tired all the time, and I've been to the doctor and they don't know what's the matter with me. That's what the Jewish approach would say. They would just say, look, don't worry about it. You don't need to do anything. You're obviously not very strong, and, perhaps you should go back to the doctor because you're looking a bit pale. I mean, the Christians notice nothing. The Christians don't notice anything. They don't seem to notice things. They must have noticed. Why didn't they notice that it's so obvious I couldn't do anything? I said, I'm so tired, I can't do anything, I'm trying. My hands are weak, my arms are weak, I don't feel well, and they're still trying to make me work. So I don't go in the second day, and of course they notice, don't they? And I was ashamed and embarrassed, and it caused no end of problems. So the next year, I didn't go in at all. Now, this was really frowned on. But it was so bloody obvious to everybody who was overseeing me that I couldn't do things. I was trying to do it, but there was no physical strength in my body. I know as a Jewish person living in the Jewish community that if I was in a Jewish community and that happened, people would say, are you not well? What's the matter if you can't do this? What is the matter? And don't you think you should be going to the doctor? And they would say, don't worry about it. You're obviously not very strong. And they'd be concerned about me. They would be concerned about me. But the Christian has no concern. That's been my experience. All they're bloody bothered about is their bloody church and their church activities. And this is what I've been found when I've been sick, is all that matters is their bloody church. And what am I doing for the church? And how soon will I be better to do something for the church? And surely there's something I could be doing for the church. And this is what, it left me always feeling ashamed and embarrassed at doing things at self-care. So I ended up not telling Christians anything. I didn't tell them that I would tidy my garden. I wouldn't tell them I cooked myself a meal. I wouldn't tell them anything, because all they would do is to try and get me to do something for the church. Now, I am severely sick now. I know if a Christian visited me, all they're interested in is what I'm doing, would be interested in, what are you doing for the church? What are you doing for other people? They wouldn't bother. They wouldn't be the slightest bit interested in actually saying, do you need any help? Is there any way I can help you? It just seemed to me that as a single person who suffered a lot of illness and debilitation throughout my life, when I was a born-again Christian, a Jewish Christian, was that all that mattered to these bloody people is their bloody church, their bloody fellowships, and doing things for them when I am struggling to cope, to look after myself. Because I've never been in the best of health. I have always been physically weak. Right. And it took years before it was diagnosed there was a problem. But I know from my experience of being in the Jewish community that even before things got really bad, that when I was within the Jewish community, it was always a case of, are you looking after yourself? Are you eating enough? Have you been to the doctor? You're looking a bit pale. I think you should this. It's much more concern. And they don't seem to think because you're single that you're selfish. This is the difference of the culture. And I think it's left a mark on me. And it's left me feeling, and I know it doesn't make sense, that I am a selfish person. Now, I am not a selfish person, because anybody who really gets to know me knows I am the opposite. I am not a selfish person. That is not one of my characteristics. I have a lot of faults. I'm well aware of my faults, because when you live on your own, I've lived on my own for over 35 years, you do get to know yourself, and you know your faults and failings, you know your weaknesses, because you're living with yourself, and you do know yourself pretty well. And selfishness is not part of my nature or character. It isn't me. Right. But the Christian doesn't view me like that. In my past, in the Christians I knew, they never thought of me like that, and they viewed me as a selfish person, because no matter what I did, it's never enough for the Christian. It's never enough for the church. It doesn't matter how much time you give to helping other people, to doing things for churches and fellowships and everything else. They are never, never satisfied. I find Christianity is the most demanding religion on the planet, because they are never satisfied. And it doesn't matter how much people are doing in the church, for the church or for other people, they're never satisfied. You give them money, they're never satisfied. All the time they harass people at services. More money, to give more money to God, give more money to the Lord, give more money to the Lord. God just doesn't want your money, he wants you to do things more for the Lord, do things more for the Lord. So you do things more for the Lord, and they still want more money, and they're constantly at you at every bloody service, in every bloody bulletin. They are never ever satisfied. It's the culture of you can never do enough for them. And this is the most awful, the most damaging thing about, in my experience of Christianity, is they're never satisfied. And they don't seem to realise that people have lives, people have families, people have responsibilities, people have jobs, people have a commitment to work, to family, to friends, to acquaintances, to the neighbours. Do they not realise that the whole world does not revolve around their bloody church and their bloody church activities? They want everybody in the church to be totally wrapped around them. And they don't realise that they're too self-preoccupied. And all they bloody care about is their bloody church and their bloody church fellowships and what you're doing for them. And they're never, never satisfied. Do they ever care about me? No. I've been chronically sick while in the church, and I'd never, never had anybody offer me help. Nobody's ever said to me, look, how do you cope? You're not well, you're on your own. Is there anything I could do? Ring me if you need any help, because it must be difficult if you're not well on your own. Nobody. They don't seem to, when it comes down to it, it's like they don't really care. Because I've had Christians, the born agains, visit me, and it's never really come across to me that they really do care. What they do is they like to be praised. Christians love to be praised and told how wonderful they are. But I never felt that they actually cared really about me. And like, you do ring me, if you need anything, if you need me to go to the chemist. I never felt there was anybody I could turn to as a Christian in the church for help. This is ridiculous, isn't it? And you might think, oh, you weren't involved with the church, and if I was. But I never felt, when it came down to it, that they really did care. Because there's this attitude of that you are selfish. And I would never ask a Christian for help. They're the last people I wouldn't ask the church for help, even when I've needed it, because I've had Christians say to me, I was really shocked at this. Somebody did a favour from theological college, a small favour, because I was so physically weak. He came to my home to move a settee, a couch for me, so I could vacuum underneath. And I thanked him, thank you so much. That's so good of you to come to do this for me. It means I'm really grateful, which I was grateful, because I couldn't do it myself. And do you know what he said to me? This is typical Christian. Well, you can do something for the church, can't you now? So he was looking for me to do something for the church, just simply because he'd come and done me a favour. Now, this is typical Christian behaviour. We've done something for you. Now what are you going to do for us? And this is when I was a born again Christian. I was shocked, I was horrified, and I was totally disgusted. I wouldn't dream of asking somebody to do something for me because I'd done them a favour. What person does that? Decent people don't do that. Decent people say, I'm glad I could help you. Call me again if you need any help and you're on your own, you need a favour. Don't hesitate. If you're not very well and you're not very strong and you need me to do something, don't hesitate, give me a ring. But no, the born-agains don't. You can do something for the church, and that's a typical attitude that I would get. And so this is, to me, the main difference between the Jewish culture, the Judaism, and Christianity. In my long experience of 42 years within the Christian community, and I found this with most people. Obviously, you've got the odd exception of the individual, but I think it comes from the culture of Christianity that self doesn't matter, self-care doesn't matter, all that matters is other people. And so I consciously now, as a person who's chronically sick and housebound most of the time through illness, have to remind myself regularly that I come first. I come before the synagogue. I come before anybody else, right? My needs, mental and physical needs, come before anybody else. It's the most important thing that I look after myself. Because if I can't look after myself properly, I will be unable to do anything for anybody, right? Now, I do things for help people, but I don't talk about it. And I don't tell anybody. I refuse to tell the evangelical Christian what I do for God, because it's none of their business anyway. What are you doing for the Lord? I'm not telling you, it's none of your business. No, it's private. Anything I do, but I don't tell anybody. And when people have asked me, once I got into this mindset decades ago, was I'm not telling you what I do for God. I'm not telling you what I do for the Lord. It's private. It's private. But the most important thing is looking after me first and foremost. It's my needs that come first, right? And I don't put other people before me. What I often try and do is put people alongside me. So it's a case of making sure I'm looked after first, and then if I can do something, I will. But it's very small. And I do it proportionately. But the most important thing is me. I becomes first. Right? I don't neglect self. For me, looking after myself is absolutely 100% the first priority, because I know from repeated experience within Christianity, they won't necessarily look after me. I've been homeless. I've been a bag lady. I know what it's like to have the door shut in my face by the Christian, by those people in the churches, by those churches that I used to attend. We're not helping you. We refuse to help you in any shape, way or form. When I was homeless, I didn't get the help. It was a real eye-opener. So I've learned from that experience, a lot of unpleasant experience, that the most important thing is to look after me. And then find if there's a little way I can help other people. And I find a way of helping other people that suits me best and that doesn't drain me physically, mentally, in any way. I do only what I'm able to do, what I physically and mentally am able to do, that doesn't do me any damage. It mustn't do me any damage, because if I'm doing something to help somebody else and it's damaging me, I mustn't do it, because I'm on my own. I have nobody looking out for me. Nobody's going to help me. I know from experience the church won't help me. If I'm homeless, out there on the street, because I've been like that, as a born again, you don't get the help. And it might be that the help has to come from an atheist. It might have to come from somebody from another religion. It doesn't necessarily mean that the born-agains will necessarily help me, or the born-agains that know me. The born-agains might be only interested in getting me involved in church activity, or say to me, yes, we'll help you, but what are you going to do for the church? Because with Christians, what can happen is they're looking for a payback. Yes, I'll do you this favour, but what are you going to do for the church? I'm not saying every single Christian is like this, but it was bad enough during my long experience of being a Christian, a Jewish Christian, is that I would never ask a born-again Christian for help. I would never ask a Messianic Jew for help. And I know that their only motivation to do things is to convert me. The problem with Christianity and Messianic Judaism is that it only wants to help people to convert people. Now, when I was a Jewish believer in Jesus, my outlook was, I am not in that the most important thing is helping people. Whether they believe in Jesus doesn't matter to me anymore. What matters, this was about 20 years ago, I remember thinking like this, all that matters is helping people. Whether they believe in Jesus is neither here nor there. What matters is helping people. Right? So I lost interest in converting people to Jesus. All that mattered to me was helping people. I no longer believe in Jesus. But if I did believe in Jesus, my attitude would be, and was before, was all that matters is helping people. There has to be no agenda to helping people. You can't say, I'm going to introduce you to God, or use it as a way of trying to get people to believe in God. It's got to be, I just want to help you because I want to help you. I want to give you a meal because I want to give you a meal. There's no agenda. I'm not seeking to get you to go to shul. I'm not seeking to get you to go to the synagogue. I'm not seeking to get you to believe in God. I'm not seeking any of that. I just want, you're hungry, I'll just give you something to eat. You need a deposit for a flat? I'll give it you. You don't even need to borrow it. You don't need to pay me back. You don't need to go to the synagogue. You don't need to go to shul. You don't need to believe in God. You don't need to believe in Jesus. There's no agenda. You don't have to do anything. Here you are. It's a gift. You're going through a difficult time. I'll help you. I just give money. I'm not interested in lending money. I would rather give people money. Don't worry about paying me back. You've hit a hard time. You're in difficult straits. You need £200. Here you are. Don't worry. Take it. With every blessing, it'll help you. You don't have to believe in God. I have no agenda. I have no agenda. And I think this, to me, is the purest form of being a good human being, is having no agenda to helping people, of being willing to feed people, give people, help people out, and have no agenda. I don't require you to believe what I believe in. All I'm interested in is, if there's anything I can do to help you, I'll help you. Right? Which is reasonable and isn't going to damage me, because I've got to look after self more. Right? I'm not going to look after your needs at the expense of my needs. Because I know from repeated experience that if I do that, nobody will help me when I need it. And I found this time and time again, unfortunately, that when I neglect self, nobody helps. And nobody reminds me from the Christian community that I need the help or offers to help. So this has been my experience, and I think personally that the Jewish religion is a healthier religion culturally to be living in than the Protestant Christian community is, for this one reason, in that it helps you to give value to you as a person, that you matter. It's important to look after yourself, to feed yourself, to clothe yourself, that if you need to go to bed, you go to bed, that if it doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm more important than the church. I'm more important than a Bible study. I'm more important than anything. And I believe that I really believe that. But I still feel guilty about it a little bit, I'll be honest with you. And I think this comes from living within Christianity, because before I became a Christian, I didn't think like this. Because I was brought up traditional Jewish, look after yourself. That's the way I was brought up. People say to me, are you keeping well? Are you looking after yourself? Don't neglect yourself. Go to the doctor. And I am so grateful to my Jewish upbringing for that. And so I'm remembering that, and it's lovely to be back in that environment a little bit, where I'm relearning that looking after yourself is very, very important. And it's also, not looking after yourself is like perhaps a bit of a slap in the face to God, because it's God who's given you life, and he wants you to nurture this life and to protect the life he's given you and to keep it healthy and to be responsible, you know, and to not make yourself sick, because he wants you to stay well. So you have a responsibility to eat properly, to eat what you're supposed to be eating, to not be eating those things that are bad for you, that will induce sickness, that could bring on sickness. Because then you're being irresponsible with the life that God has given you. Because he wants you to nurture the life he's given you and to look after it. Not neglect keeping yourself clean and looking after self. You also teach by example, because your children will learn to look after themselves. If they see you looking after yourself, they will learn how to look after themselves, that it's important that they wash themselves, they clean their teeth every day, that they wash the hair soon, as soon as it gets dirty, that they wash the clothes, that they, if they get a high temperature, that they drink lots of water and they go to bed. If they see you doing this and looking after yourself, they will learn to self-care for themselves. And then they will learn how to look after other people who are neglecting themselves, and they can come in and help the person, say, you're not well, you need to go to bed, you've got a temperature, no, you mustn't go out, you must stay in and look after yourself. So the very fact of knowing how to care for yourself means you learn how to care for other people. So you then can look after other people, your friends, relations, people in the community. So when you notice somebody is not well, you say, oh, you don't look well. Are you eating properly? You look a bit pale. Have you got a temperature? You need to go to the doctor. So if you are looking after yourself properly, then you will be looking after other people properly who are neglecting themselves. And this is how you can care for others, because you set the standard for yourself, and therefore you look after other people and say, you really need to be drinking more water, or you don't seem to be having much fruit and veg, it would be that good if you could have some more fruit and veg, do you good, you need to be eating a proper meal, when did you have your last meal, and all of that. If you're looking after yourself properly, you will do the same for other people. And I just hope if you're a Christian or Messianic Jew listening to this, that what I've said will resonate with you, and that you will start looking after yourself better, and put yourself first before anybody else.